Welcome back for the anatomy of the spine. So we just finished talking joint actions, the skeletal system. So we're going to dive deeper into specifically the spine or the spinal column. So your spinal column is made up of vertebrae, 34 to be exact. It holds the body upright and allows us to bend and to twist in all directions. So our spine is created, like I said, of vertebrae and is in a natural S curve. That S curve is very important because it not only one makes our spine incredibly strong and able to support us, but it also gives us a good shock absorbing quality. So it is divided up into 5 different regions. You have your cervical spine, which is your neck curvature. You have your thoracic spine, which is that mid back region, and it has an outward curvature. You have the lumbar spine or your low back, which curves inward slightly. And then you have your sacrum, which is that triangle shaped bone at the end of your spinal column, curves outwards, and then our coccyx or our tailbone. So these are the natural curves of each section, and you can see how it helps one shock absorb to hold us upright from the back, the other side. So our spinal column is made up of vertebrae, and in between each vertebrae is a disc that acts as a cushion. It is called the intervertebral disc. So if you look at this image here, it'll show you in between both vertebrae, that cushion or that disc. That disc is a cartilaginous joint. We just talked about this. So it's mainly made of cartilage here between the two bones. The only portion of our spine that does not have this disc are our 2 top vertebrae, our atlas and our axis in our cervical spine, up at the base of your skull or your neck. They do not have this. So the reason for this disc is one, shock absorption. It helps whenever we jump, we bend, or we get hopefully not hit by something to absorb any kind of force or pressure on the spine. It also protects our spine in bending. It also really influences the range of motion for each segment of the spine. Now, on the vertebrae, you also have something called a joint facet. If you look here, you can see how that looks on the vertebrae. Your joint facet influences the movement of each region of the spine. So, for example, the cervical spine does not have much mobility. However, the thoracic spine does. And this comes back to our joint facets. Now, when talking about the spine and including foundations of form, it's important to be aware of the range of motion for each segment of the spine. And for us as teachers to be able to cue generalized body positions from this understanding. So we always cue back to the spine in its natural position. So directions of the spine. We have 5 of them. We have a neutral position where you are just standing upright, anatomical position. The degree is 0. Your spine is in a natural neutral position. You have flexion of the spine, which is like forward folds. You have extension, which would be back bends. Lateral flexion, which would be side to side bending or side activation. And then you have rotation or twists. So, whenever we're talking about the directions of the spine, it really goes back to those body planes. And that's why I have this image included on this slide. It's the planes of the body that we think about how our spine moves around. So, a neutral position is how this person is standing here. Like I said, gaze is forward, hands are down by our side, shoulders are stacked over our hips. Flexion, whenever we forward folds, Excuse me if I'm wrong in this. I believe that is a sagittal motion, front to back. I could be wrong on that. I will have to double check. Extension, back bends, lateral flexion, side to side. That is that side body. I believe that is sagittal, and flexion and extension would be frontal. I will double check and get back to you on this. We'll talk about it this weekend. The rotation for sure is on the transverse plane. So, keeping those body planes in mind, making sure it's easy to get confused on them. So, obviously, making sure you know which direction of the spine correlates to what body plane is also important here. So, knowing how the spine works, knowing the different proportions of the spine, your cervical, your thoracic, your lumbar, all the different portions of the spine, how they move, if they move, is so important to your cueing and your foundations of knowing how to move somebody's body in a classroom.